Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, August 30th, 2013. To bomb or not to bomb? That is the question facing President Barack Obama. There really is no other story out there, as far as I'm concerned, because bombing Syria could be the domino that gets kicked over that leads us into World War III. And no, I am not being over-dramatic. It looks like the president has already made his choice. He has sent his 5th U.S. destroyer to the eastern Mediterranean off the Syrian coast. These destroyers are capable of sending cruise missiles into Syria. The Russians have also sent naval vessels off the Syrian coast. As far as our allies go, our two biggest, France says no. We should wait and have a diplomatic solution. We should wait for the United Nations to determine who used chemical weapons. There's still a case. Some people say they don't know. The United States and our allies say it was the Assad regime. They did it. The Assad regime and the Russians say, oh no, it was the rebels. They were losing and they want to bait America into the conflict. But I don't think Barack Obama is going to wait for the United Nations. And I don't think he's going to get approval from Congress. Why? According to a recent poll, 91% of Americans do not want the United States to take military action in Syria. 91%. This is more unpopular than Congress itself, and it's saying a lot. Members of Congress wrote President Obama a letter asking him to come to Congress and let them debate it and get approval. That letter included 18 Democrats and 98 Republicans. I suspect members of his own party, with a 91% disapproval rating of this action, members of his own party, many, would vote this down. He wouldn't get approval. No way. Even so, it looks like the president's red line talk, he said if chemical weapons were used, that would be a red line. His red line talk has painted him into a very nasty, tight corner. If he goes ahead, he looks like a loner and a cowboy. If he backs down, he looks weak, looks like a loser. This is the ultimate lose-lose choice for our American president. And it's something that President Obama has only himself to blame. Meanwhile, Speaker of the House John Boehner sent the president a letter asking him many questions, but things like, what's your plan? What do you hope to accomplish? How much money do you think you're going to spend? I mean, after all, we do have a debt ceiling coming up, and America has financial problems. And we need another war? Boehner did not ask him to come to Congress, which I find strange and a little weak. I thought Boehner, Speaker of the House, should ask the president, if you're going to do this, and this has implications to World War III. A lot of people don't want to say that, but there are definite implications of World War III. I mean, everybody's represented, the French, the U.S., the Arabs, the Syrians, the Iranians, the Russians. Everybody has a stake, has a dog in this fight. Now, some people say the president doesn't need congressional approval, and they cite past actions by other Republican presidents in Panama and Grenada, even Libya for Barack Obama. Nothing in Libya, Panama, or Grenada could have touched off World War III. Nothing. This could. Now, the president says, well, this is, just a shot across the bow. Firing hundreds of missiles into a country at its largest city, or at one of its largest cities, and military bases is a shot across the bow? No, that's an act of war. Just like firing missiles into New York City or Detroit or L.A. would be an act of war. Just like firing missiles into one of our military bases like, Fort Bragg would be an act of war. The Iranians and the Syrians say that, if Syria is attacked by the United States, they're going to attack Israel. This is where it gets scary, folks. Israel will surely respond. If that happens, I'm sure Hamas in the south will start firing rockets into Israel. Hezbollah will start firing rockets south. Who knows what they're going to be laced with, chemical weapons. They could start a wider war, in the Golan Heights between Syria and Israel. Could be terror attacks around the globe. But Israel will respond. And what happens if Israel says, you know, the Iranians are kind of behind Hamas and Hezbollah, and they're helping the Syrians. And they have this nuclear program that we think is something that the Iranians want to, develop to have nuclear weapons, which to drop on Israel. Of course, the Iranians say it's for the peaceful production of energy, but whatever. What happens if Israel attacks Iran directly and just tries to knock them out of the box? I mean, Israel can't take a punch. They have like a glass jaw. They have a tiny country. A nuclear attack, and I'm not saying it would be, but a chemical weapons attack or a suitcase nuke in Tel Aviv, would cripple the whole country. It's a small country. And what happens if they try to knock Iran right out of the box? What happens if Russia scrambles fighters and shoots down our cruise missiles? Hundreds of cruise missiles. They scramble fighters, and they have supersonic fighters with supersonic missiles, and cruise missiles are subsonic. What are they, less than 600 miles an hour, 550 miles an hour, a cruise missile? That can be shot down. What happens if the Russians, whose ships are right out there in the Mediterranean, start shooting down our cruise missiles as we fire them off our ships? What happens if they close the Strait of Hormuz? What happens if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz? Knocks out, 18% of the world's oil traveling through there. What happens if the Suez Canal is shut down, another 8% of the world's oil? What happens if Saudi Arabia oil fields are attacked? What happens if there are chemical attacks in Europe because of this? Then would the UK and France get involved? Also, if this happens, the derivative market could go haywire. It's just the interest rate swaps or interest rate derivatives are some $400 trillion. The U.S. has banks in the U.S. have more than $200 trillion in interest rate swaps. What happens if the derivative market goes haywire? What happens if big banks start collapsing and we have a daisy chain of collapse? 10 Lehman Brothers that, in a matter of a week. What happens if oil doubles or triples in price? What happens if the economy completely falls out of bed and whatever so-called recovery turns into a depression? The answer to those questions is, and the scary thing about all those questions is all of them could happen, and that should scare anyone. I've been telling you about the Syrian story for the better part of a year. I think this is a huge story. And the reason why, because it could, as I've been saying, touch off a wider war, could start World War III. Gerald Celente, the top trends forecaster in America, says, hey, this is, when countries get into financial trouble, and the U.S. is, the West is in financial trouble. That's why they're talking about bail-ins, and they have, $85 billion a month printed out every month, and near 0% interest rates on a key rate, and they're suppressing interest rates because the economy is so weak. When economies get bad, are in trouble, Celente says countries go to war. Is that the reason why we're doing this? People like Jim Rogers, who's been on USAWatchdog.com, and Gregory Mannarino, they have great minds, and they trade and they invest, and they think gold and oil and silver are all going much, much higher. But this war has another potential, and that is it could go nuclear. The U.S. is involved, nuclear power. Russia is involved, nuclear power. China is involved, nuclear power. What happens if somebody nukes somebody, even a tactical nuke? Even if Israel goes after Iran's nuclear sites, it'd surely have to use some sort of tactical nuclear weapon. If this thing turns nuclear, the economy is the least of our problems. And it is a big deal. I don't see how Barack Obama gets out of this. It looks like he's going to attack, and I hope I am wrong. Finally, I have one final word on Edward Snowden. I thought he was pretty heroic by exposing these NSA spy programs where millions and millions of Americans were spied upon and their data was collected, their phone calls and emails were listened to and read. He exposed that we were spying on the entire globe. We were spying on our allies. And this is unconstitutional. He exposed unconstitutional activity by our government. He sparked a nationwide, worldwide debate. And for that, I thought he was a hero. But his latest disclosure, I think he crossed the line. He exposed our black budget, what we spend for intelligence and spying and security. He exposed our victories, what we knew. He exposed what we didn't know. He surely exposed our intelligence assets and likely put some of them in jeopardy. And for that, I think he's a traitor. You know, I may criticize the country, but I want America to succeed, and I would never sell her out. And I think this time, Snowden went too far, and he sold us out. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog. Thank you very much for using the donations button. I appreciate that. Have a nice weekend.